Hey everyone, welcome to Wisdom and Grit Live. My goal with this show is to introduce you to other men who are building the world and to expose you to what's possible so that you can build a life that actually matters to you. Today's guest, simply put, is an anomaly, meaning his approach to life is not mainstream. He has the ability to see things in a systematic level and then helps other people to see how easy it can be. Having started his first business in a hotel lobby and mastering the art of outsourcing, he has since gone on to start multiple companies that run on their own. He pushes the boundaries of what we accept as reality and genuinely shares his experience with hungry podcast audience. His online business building experience teaches others how to get featured on targeted podcast shows and position them for explosive growth. With his own podcast, just finding out he has actually two. He's interviewed guests such as Tom Billio, Naveen Jain, Russell Brunson, and others who are architecting the future. And then on his own personal podcast, where it's a daily podcast, he just talks about just experiences that are happening day to day in his life. Please welcome our guest today, Daniel Gefen. Daniel, thanks for being on.
Woo! Thank you so much for having me.
Man, my pleasure. It's been awesome to follow you over the last few months. I remember exactly how we connected, actually. I saw an article that you wrote on the ClickFunnels group talking about your grandfather. And man, it was like mind-boggling, just the stuff that he's been through. But I was immediately blown away, and I asked you to share it inside of the group. And that was how we got connected. And since then, I've just been following you here and there, man. So
I appreciate the support, Corey. Really, thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. Well, I definitely love the way that you have just kind of a view of the world. It's not like most people. And I would love to kind of dive into why, because sometimes I'm a big question asker, right? And so the whole concept of nature versus nurture, is always there for anybody who's really trying to explore the essence of life. But what is it about you, man, that kind of gives you that unique approach to life?
Oh, that's really tough. I think I don't like to do what everyone else is doing. I like to kind of just question everything. That's kind of, and sometimes it's a curse. It's a blessing on the one hand and it's a curse on the other hand, because the thing is, when you question too much, you can also get stuck in your own head. And I find that that's an issue that it's a trap that sometimes I fall into, where I'm just over questioning everything. And but it's also one of my greatest strengths, is that I don't just take the status quo. I don't just accept it. If someone says no, I usually try to look into it. Is there a way around that? Can I turn that no into a yes? If something is one way, I try to find another way of doing it. And if you look at most, successful entrepreneurs, that's what we do. Entrepreneurs are, people who didn't fit in the box. Like we didn't fit in high school. We didn't fit into the system. We didn't fit into the 9 to 5. Go and take a lunch at 1 o'clock. Well, what if I'm not hungry at 1 o'clock? Maybe I want to eat at 3 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? So just that whole not wanting to fit in a box, and it's not even coming from a place of rebellion. It's just coming from a place of, this is how I was created. I have more thoughts going on in my head, and like I said before, sometimes it's a curse where I'm just like literally waking up in the morning, and I'm just bombarded with these ideas, and I go to sleep at night and it's hard for me to fall asleep because my brain is constantly working. And sometimes I kind of wish I was just like everyone else, where I could just go to work, come back, go to sleep, and just live a kind of, that kind of just regular life. But this is what I have. And so, yeah.
So what is it about that would make you wish that you had more of an average approach to life?
To me, it's the ups and downs. I have these major highs, and then I can have major downs. And the downs, again, going back to what I was saying before, the downs come from this questioning. Why am I here? What am I doing? what's the point of it all? Like again, like people watching this, usually entrepreneurs suffer from this kind of hole, this like deep hole of like, just what's the point?
Yeah.
One day I'm like really excited and I'm going to go and I'm going to conquer the world and I'm just going to inspire millions of people and I'm going to just, do all these things. And then another day I wake up and I'm just like, but what's the point?
Yeah.
And then the questioning starts, and it's like a vicious cycle of being really high and excited by life and conquering and climbing higher, and then that dip where you just feel so empty and nothing can fill you up. Not money, not relation, like nothing can fill you up. Like I'm married to an amazing, incredible wife for it's going to be our 12-year anniversary next week, January 2nd.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And we have five beautiful children. I have a business, I have a community, I'm healthy, thank God. So you have all of these, I have all these things, and yet sometimes I just feel like there's this hole that nothing can fill that void. And it comes from that place of needing something deeper from life. It's not enough just to go to the office, check in, check out, get my salary at the end of the month, eat a good meal, go on a vacation, get married, have a few kids, retire. It's just not enough.
Yeah.
I can't. I think people who will get me, and people who don't, like, just won't understand it. Do you know what I mean?
I can totally relate with you. Yeah, I mean, I get it 100%.
It's like addicts. You go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting, and if you're an addict, you just straight away get it. You know exactly what they're saying. You like relate to everything. If you're not an addict, you have no idea what they're talking about. It just doesn't make it. Like, what are you saying? Why don't you just stop? Why don't you just quit? And they just want to strangle you because, okay, dude, you don't understand it. So just don't try to understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
trying to make things just brush over the surface. I think I might have a tendency to do that sometimes, but it more comes out of how I've experienced life and knowing that, man, like you have to snap yourself out of things sometimes in order to be able to move on to the next thing, so we do call that out. But so that's interesting that you have such an existential awareness to life. I mean, I tend to be the same way. And I'm not really sure what drives that. I've been kind of, down the same path as you, I think, just I struggled through school and kind of really for a long time tried to figure out my place in this life. And then when I did, it just lit me up, and I think it really, at the end of the day, comes down to serving other people, right? And loving them.
Yeah. You know what I believe? I believe that we were given a gift, and the gift is so powerful. We're able to make a massive impact on the world. But with that gift comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. And I think that responsibility sometimes gets too much for us. And so it weighs down on us, and we just feel like we can't handle that amount of responsibility. But part of growing up and being mature is accepting that that's your responsibility and that's what you have to do. It's not, you can't hide away. You were not made to hide away. You were made to go out and impact the world. You were created to be a light for people. That's it. Sounds, I don't want to sound cheesy and wooey because there's enough of that out there, enough BS. I'm tired of all the BS of, this is, life transformational. And the problem is that in our industry, in sort of the life transformational industry, which is what we're in, and most of us as entrepreneurs, we're in that industry where we're looking to transform lives. It's not enough for us to make a few bucks or to help a few people. We're here to transform lives. And the problem is that in that space, you have a lot of charlatans, you have a lot of fakers, you have a lot of people who are just making the industry look bad. And you know what I'm talking about, the people who,
Yeah.
stand next to the Ferraris and the mansions, and they're, hey, if you don't buy, in the next 30 minutes, if you don't sign up now, that's it, it's gone forever. And of course, you come back 3 days and the timer is still ticking. It's like, what do you think? I'm stupid?
Yeah.
But these things like that, these types of tactics, I'm just tired of seeing it over and over again. They'll just stop it. Seriously, if you're doing those things, just cut it out. It's like, it's not working. Oh, it is working. Excuse me, I take it back. It is working because you're preying on people's hope. And I hate that.
Yeah.
You're preying on people's fear, right? That's what it is. It's scarcity tactics. It's saying, hey, in 30 minutes, this is going to be gone. And people are scared and they're struggling. People are struggling and they need hope, and you're selling them hope. You better be backing that up, because there's too many people out there that are selling crap. They're not backing it up. They're not giving value, and they're just doing it. They're doing it for the money. And, we've got to expose those people, and we've got to, not even expose them, but just, we've got to do it right. That's it. We've got to do it the right way.
I think that's the opportunity that exists, Daniel. Like, whenever you talk about that, it comes down to really anything in life is we can't control things that are really not within our grasp, right? Of how other people are going to do things within the industry and all that. And it comes down to the opportunity exists for us to be the example, and people are going to see it plainly when we get out there and we put ourselves out there, and they see our services and our products and the ability that we have to transform, really, because we desire to and create tremendous value. And that's the big kicker, is a lot of times people who are really want to make a difference, they have a heart to do that. They're not really good at putting themselves out there, or they think that somehow makes them vain, or that this and that. And so this is a really big point to today's show, because you obviously know that that's not the case, right? You have to put yourself out there if you want to be able to have impact.
Those are the types of people I love working with. I call them the hidden heroes.
That's good.
They're the hidden heroes because they're the ones that really do have something to offer. They do have substance, and they want to give, and they do care, but they just don't know how to put themselves out there. And they've got this kind of pull because they know that they've got this gift, and they know that they want to, and they've got this drive and this deep passion for it, but there's something holding them back. They're just not managing to get out there and that's those are the types of people I want to work with. Those are exactly the types of people I want to work with.
So when you work with someone, actually, I want to kind of take a step back here. When in the introduction, I read online that you started your first business in a hotel lobby. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
The hotel lobby situation. So that was that was funny. My first business was a call center that I started it from scratch. And at one point, it's a very long story, and I've written it in my book. So for those that want to read it, there's a book I wrote called The Self-Help Addict. So I'll give you the very abridged version of it. But essentially, I had scaled the business up. I had a couple of hundred clients, and the person I'm not an operational guy. I don't do operations. That's not my key strength. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that you've got to know what your key strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and you've just got to focus on your strengths. That's it. Right. You've got to double down on your strengths. Just to give an example, by the way, so today I wanted to edit a video that I had. I interviewed Russell Brunson from ClickFunnels. And I wanted to just do like a 60-second, one of those 60-second clips. I thought, how hard could it be already, right? I mean, it's just a 60-second clip, and I want to, make it look all pretty like they do, like Gary Vee has these like pretty looking thing. I thought, how hard could it be? I'll just do it 4 hours later, Corey. blinking hours later, I'm still faffing around trying to figure out the font, this and that, and I'm just going crazy. And then the dimensions were wrong, and then the what's it called, the captions underneath, they weren't syncing with the audio, and I'm just like, nah, you know.
That's
and
hilarious.
it's just like one of those days where I'm just like, I just spent half my day producing a 60-second clip. Am I mad? Am I insane? But that's when you've got to realize, like, that's not your strength. You're not an editing guy. You're creative, and you can create great, you can interview, and you can get up on stage, and you can motivate, and you can, you're a people's person, and you're a networker, and all these things, but you can't edit for toffee. So let the editors edit, and you do what you do. Anyway, so going back to what I was saying, my first company, I learned it the hard way. I wasn't an operations guy. That's not what I'm good at. And so I ended up, realizing it when I wanted to smash my head into the wall every day, because I was like serving the clients and not knowing what to do, and just the whole thing. I could sell, I could close, I can get people in, but once they were in, I didn't know how to service them. So finally I hired someone who became my operations manager. And she took over the whole business. I mean, literally, she ran the whole business. And it was like, oh, thank God, an angel sent from heaven, and I was in my element. And then one day, literally, she calls me up, and out of the blue, she just tells me she can't come to work. And I thought, oh God, maybe she's got the flu or something. And I'm already thinking, like, how am I going to manage without her? Because I really, like, depended on her being around. But I figured, okay, if it's a couple of days, hopefully I'll be able to manage, right? So I said, oh, when do you think you'll be able to come back? Is everything okay? And she's like, well, I don't know how to say this to you, but I almost committed suicide. And I was like, what? She's like, my boyfriend broke up with me, and I went into this deep depression, and I almost took my life, and I went to see a psychiatrist, and he basically put me on meds and told me I can't work for the next 6 months at least.
Oh wow!
Now, today she's fine. I've kept up with her, and she's okay. Thank God. But my business was suddenly in a very serious situation, because now I didn't know what to do. And I remember I kind of like ran home, just like a little boy, like a little boy running away for and you know what I mean? Like sometimes we become these like little boys who are just like, oh, mommy, help me.
Yeah, exactly.
And I called up my business mentor. And by the way, and this is another thing that I've learned the hard way. You've got to have business mentors. You've got to have mentors in your life, because if you don't, you're on your own. It's really lonely. And, if it wasn't for this one mentor, I'm telling you, the thing is, I didn't appreciate this business mentor until I had this one conversation, which saved my whole business. It literally saved my whole business. One conversation with a business mentor. I called him up. His name was Gavin Yuko. And I said, Gavin, and I started literally crying to him. I don't know what to do. My business is like, I'm not going to be able to hire someone, and I've got hundreds of clients, and they're going to be on my head, and I don't know how to operate the business. I don't know what to do. And after about 15 minutes of me just, dumping, he turns around to me and he does something that I completely didn't expect, right? Because I'm thinking, don't worry, Daniel, you're fine. I thought he was going to give me sympathy. Oh, it's a terrible situation. You're right. Oh, my goodness. Instead, he literally gives me a smack in the face. He's like, Daniel, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Get up off your backside and go do something about it.
That's awesome.
Literally, smack in the face. And I was like, what? I was in shock. And he hangs up on me. And it clicks. I'm like, he's right. I need to get up, get out of the self-pity, and go do something. Think, that part of being an entrepreneur is you've got to take the responsibility, and you've got to figure out a way, because the one thing that we have as entrepreneurs, the one superpower that we have, is we can think a way out of anything. We really can. And this because in school you managed to wangle your way out of, right. so many stories I could tell about how I got myself into trouble and then managed to figure out a way out of the trouble, right? So I go for this. I go for a walk just to clear my head, and and suddenly this idea pops in my head, and this was the transformation for me, and that was to outsource my company to one of my competitors,
Mm.
which of course everybody else thought was a crazy idea. You're insane. Why would you do that? How can you trust a competitor? Why would you give it? What all of all everyone was just like no way, no way. But again, as an entrepreneur, right, we create our own path. And it doesn't matter
Mm.
if everyone else says you can't do it. That's a dumb idea. That's not going to work. Don't be stupid. We just say, well, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong. And 8 years later, today, the business is still running. It's outsourced fully to a competitor. The story of me working in a hotel lobby was essentially I fired my staff, got rid of everything, equipment, got rid of the office, drove to a local hotel with my laptop and my phone, and literally scaled my business just from the hotel lobby. I was there for about a year until finally the manager of the hotel comes up to me one day and says, "Excuse me, sir, do you live in the hotel?" I'm like, "No, I
That's
don't live
funny.
here. I work here. Well, I don't work here. I work from here, and I have a business that whatever." And he's like, "Well, do you mind working somewhere else?" So that was that story. Um, but
That's good, man.
yeah,
So, real quick, so I want to go back to the whole business mentor thing. Do you pay
yes,
your mentors, or is it just people that you're finding that you're
both.
asking that you think would be a good fit?
Both, both. Some are paid and some are unpaid. Some are just people in my network who I've built relationships with, and we have a sort of you scratch my back, I scratch yours type of relationship.
Yeah,
When they need me, and it's just it's natural. It's natural once you expand your network and you get yourself
right.
out there more. You end up having. I mean, I can't tell you through my podcast the types of the caliber of experts that I've managed to just get on a call with is absolutely incredible. I remember at one point when I was like really struggling, I reached out to, I don't know, do you know Alex Sheffron?
I know the name. Yeah,
Alex Sheffron. Anyway,
he's a big marketer, right?
massive, massive. And like
Yeah,
literally, I just got on my phone, I Facebook messaged him, and he's like, "Sure, buddy, let's talk." And it's just things like that, or I can whatever I can name drop, but the point is that I've got a big network that I've created, and so
yeah.
when I need advice on anything, I have someone to be able to pick up the phone or message. But
Was that through the
paying,
podcast?
yeah,
Your
100%.
network?
Yeah, before
Yeah,
I did podcasting, before I discovered the podcast world, I was in a little tiny bubble. Like nobody,
yeah.
I didn't know anyone. Nobody knew me. I was in this little bubble, and I had no idea that it even existed. The world that I'm in right now.
So, do you keep relationships with those people after you've interviewed them for the most part? And
First of all, absolutely, you've got to keep relationships with everybody that you interview, but also I've been on over 60 podcasts as well, and I keep in touch with the hosts because again, the hosts of the podcasts are incredible people like you, Corey, right? So
that's right.
it's important to build those relationships and build those networks. And think about it, talking about getting on podcast shows, okay? Every podcast that you guest on, if you keep in touch, if you keep in touch with the host, bear in mind that the host is constantly interviewing experts and influencers, and so their network is expanding constantly. And the
Yeah,
more the more hosts that you're connected to, the more like doors that are just wide open for you because they make one introduction to someone that you would take years to possibly get in the door with. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I I give you an example. Someone I had Neil Patel on my show, okay,
yeah. Saw that. That's big.
and someone said to me, "Oh my goodness, Neil Patel! Like, I've been trying to get hold of Neil Patel for the last 3 years, and I've tried everything. One email was it. I connected him with Neil. Done. Because that's
Well,
that's the power of having a network.
yeah.
That
Was
is the
it
power.
through an introduction or something?
You talking about me introducing him to Neil?
Yeah, no, was it through an
Or
introduction that you were able to get in, Neil Patel on your
for
podcast?
for me to get Neil? Okay, so that's a question I get often. You know, how do you get people like Neil Patel,
Right.
Russell Brunson, Tom Bill? Like, how do you get all these
Yeah.
people? And the answer is that you've got to start somewhere. You've got to
Right.
start somewhere, and that means, you know, it's like a ladder, okay? But what's really cool is that the more you climb the ladder, the faster you're able to climb. And I'll tell you why. Let's say you've got A listers, B listers, C listers, D listers. Like let's just call it A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right? You start off
Mm.
with just the G listers, like the people who are not necessarily very well known, and you start interviewing them. But what happens is as you do more interviews, or as you get to know more people in that sort of space, they know people who are maybe one rung up. You know, they might
Right.
know the you know the D-listers, right? And then you get introduced to that circle, okay? And then the D-listers may know the C-listers, and you get introduced to that circle. And then the B-listers, and then that's how it works. See, for
Okay.
example, Neil Patel. Why would Neil Patel come on my show? It's very simple, because he looks at my guests, he looks at my circle, my network, and he sees, wow, he had Russell Brunson. Wow, he had Yannick Silva. You know, wow, you know, he's had the singer Matasiao. Like, he's got A-class guests. And so if
Yeah.
they've gone on his show, you know, Jay Abraham, Jay Abraham
Yeah.
is a legend. He's a
Yeah.
legend. So anyone who sees that I've interviewed someone like Jay Abraham, they're like, oh, okay, you know. So you've got to climb the ladder. It's you've got to climb that networking ladder. You could do it the slow way, which is just doing it yourself, which is what I did, and I spent 4 years building my network. Or you can hire someone or work with someone like me who basically can open those doors much quicker than you would on your own. It's that simple. Yeah. So there is a way to pay to take the shortcut.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't even like really comprehend the concept that they could be across, sitting there interviewing people that are influencers in basically architecting the world will look in the future,
Yeah.
And I love that part about what we do. And just in general, I've always been the kind of guy who can go out and start a conversation with really anybody. And I tend to build relationships really quickly. And I love building relationships with influencers, mainly because I love the way that they think. And I'm just sincerely curious about like why people do things a certain way, and the way that they tick and all that, and then kind of just learning. It's hands-on learning and things like that. But my personal experience, a lot of it has just been ask and positioning, right? So framing who you are and kind of your authority already out of the gate, and then asking, and that seemed to work pretty well for me. But
yeah, positioning yourself as an authority is, for me, the most efficient way to get attention from not only the people that you want to attract into your network, but also the types of clients that you want to attract. It's all about positioning yourself as the expert. It's all about that. And once you've cracked that nut, you're going to see like people are literally just going to be knocking on your door, and you're going to be like, whoa, what's going on over here? Like, I used to have to knock on people's doors. I used to have to go from door to door, literally like, begging people to like work with me, please be my client, please. Oh, you want a discount? Sure. Oh, you want a different service? Okay, I'll change my whole company. Yeah, oh, you don't like the name of my business? I'll change the freaking name of my business just to work with you, please.
Yeah.
Then you become an expert in your space, and people are bashing your door, and you're saying, do you know what? How excited are you to work with me? Well, I mean, no, forget it. If you're not excited, if you don't value what I bring to the table, no, thank you. I'm not going to work with you. I don't want to.
Yeah.
What's the price? Well, this is the price. Well, could you think you can do me no? And if you don't see the value, then that's fine. Then there's other people that you can work with. You'll find that
That's
the
the
people
big
who
kicker. I think it's understanding that, not coming from that position of scarcity to believe that that one client is all that's out there in a world of over 7 billion, right? I mean, it's insanity the
it's
way that we tend to look at
total,
things sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all limited belief. But the thing is, again, once you establish yourself as an authority, those limiting beliefs start to fall away because people, I mean, again, and I don't want to sound egotistical because, sometimes, my ego kind of takes over and I need to shut it down, like, shut up, ego.
I get that.
You know what I mean? That you've just got to be like,
Yeah.
leave me alone. So humbly, I mean this in the most humble way. I still get, I'm still surprised when people randomly message me saying, I had a guy who messaged me saying, Daniel, I just drove from one end of the US to the other. Like he was literally doing a cross country. What do they call it when you drive cross country? What do they call that? Road trip.
Oh
he
yeah,
was
yeah.
doing he was doing a road
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah.
And he said, I listened to one of your episodes and I got hooked to your show and I listened back to back the whole trip. I think he listened to like, I don't know how many episodes, how many hours, but hours and hours.
Huh.
And I was like, why? Like, what? Are you kidding me? But, and so it starts to, because I do still have doubts and we all do. We get plagued with self-doubts where it's like, you get imposter syndrome where you feel like, I'm not that big of it. Like, why are people making out like I'm so, I'm nothing. Like, what am I already? I'm just a regular guy. Like, what's the big deal? But the more people start saying things like, wow, Daniel, you've changed my life. I had someone who was literally on the verge of committing suicide. He was so depressed and he listened to one of my episodes and he's turned his life around. He's now an author. He's a podcast host. He's got his own business. He's an athlete, all because it started with him stumbling upon one of my episodes. And when I get feedback like that, it gives me that, there is something that I can give of value to people. And I can, charge what I want to charge. And I can work with who I want to work with. And that's real freedom. Because the thing is that entrepreneurs, they leave the job, they leave that 9-to-5 job and they're chasing freedom. We're all chasing freedom. And the thing is, what we find is that we have less freedom. We're working with people we don't want to work with, working overtime for them. Okay, sometimes we're going months without getting any money. Forget about a paycheck. We're getting Zippo. The bank's banging on the door saying, "Hey, dude, your overdraft, is too much.
Yeah.
What are you doing?" And it's like, oh my God, what am I doing? It's like, forget that. Give me back the job. Like, it's just crazy. You're dealing with all sorts of issues. Staff that are like just screwing up everything. You're just like, what the heck are you doing, right?
Yeah.
And
dude,
how is that? So how's that freedom? And so again, when you position yourself as the authority and people come to you and you're able to work with people that you want to work with, and you could charge a price that you want to charge, that you feel is that's your value, that's real freedom.
That's good. So I want to kind of, I'm hearing you talk about a lot of these things, and I can't help but wonder how much of this, the way that you see the world is crafted through how your grandfather kind of showed you, about, or what he showed you and sharing his wisdom about life and all that. And I know you totally adore him, understandably so. So real quick, and I don't mean to, I know there's probably a million things you could say about him, but why don't you tell the story real quick about your grandfather and how all the stuff that he went through, and then just kind of some of the lessons maybe you learned from him along the way.
So what's interesting about my grandfather is he actually didn't speak English, so I couldn't even speak to him. So we never had a conversation. So all the inspiration and everything that I got from him really was from his stories that I heard from my father tell about my grandfather. And I would see my grandfather. Obviously, we'd see, and we would hug, and he'd give me some money, and that's all I cared about when I was younger.
What
I
did
didn't
he
care
speak?
about.
Was it Hebrew or?
He spoke actually a number of languages, but just all the languages I don't
Okay.
speak. You know,
Okay.
I think he spoke French. He spoke Hebrew. He spoke German. He spoke Yiddish. He spoke
Wow.
a bit of Italian. Well, actually, he spoke, I think, fluently Italian, actually, because he lived in Lugano, which is in Switzerland, which is on the border of Italy. So he spoke
Wow.
fluent Italian. And I think there were like one or two other languages. My father speaks 7 languages as well.
Wow.
But the one language, English, we he didn't speak. We spoke brokenly, but never really. So
Yeah.
my grandfather's story is essentially, I mean, he when he was 13 years old, he was taken into a concentration camps by the Nazis. He grew up in Poland, and his whole family was taken. He ended up in 18 different concentration camps over 5 years. He went through 3 death marches. At one point, he was digging in the fields, and the shovel, he flicked up some dirt, and one of the Nazi soldiers was standing there, and the dirt hit him. And so the Nazi picked up his gun and pointed it at my grandfather's, face, and basically said, "You're dead." And he shot the gun, and the bullet. My grandfather was kind of like bent down, and the bullet hit. He held the spade, the shovel, and the bullet hit the shovel, and my grandfather lay down pretending to be dead because he knew if he popped up again, he'd shoot again.
Finished him off.
It's so the Nazis thought he was dead, and my grandfather just lay there until it was safe for him to come out. Another story that I heard was that he was a few feet from the gas chambers where they would gas the prisoners, the slaves, and a Nazi was standing there, and the horse defecated on the Nazi's boot. And this Nazi turned around to my grandfather, who was the one closest to him, and said, "Get out here, you dirty Jew, and clean this up." And so my grandfather bent down and cleaned it up. And then by the time he finished cleaning, the line was done for the day. Every day there was like a certain amount that went. So
Wow.
he was saved by horse dung. And then another story was they were putting him on the gallows to hang him. And essentially what happened was the sirens went off the first time. The sirens went off. There was twice this happened. So the first time the sirens went off, and he managed to, they ran away. They were worried, and he escaped into the forest. And then they took dogs and they chased him down, and they brought him back, and they put him up again for the second time. And this time it was the siren, but it was the real sirens, and he was liberated.
Oh man.
His whole family was murdered. When he was liberated, he had literally nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. He didn't, not a penny to, not a dime, no one, no friends, no family. And he built himself up. He totally, completely built himself from scratch. So when when I'm having a down day, sometimes when I'm feeling like it's a bit rough,
Yeah.
I just think about him, and I think about how can someone go through that and still come out and still get married and have children and like run a business and his whole life was dedicated to serving people. Everything he did was serving people. He gave most of his money. He became a multimillionaire doing trading, currency trading. This is before the internet, obviously. So he had like a little pager, and when and he would just like call his broker and tell them to buy or sell. And he made millions. He also had his own hotel. By the way, the reason why he built the hotel wasn't to make money. He had enough money. He just wanted to service people. He wanted to see people happy, and he wanted to give to them. And he was a chef in his own hotel. He was one of the chefs in the kitchen, and you would see him with his sleeves rolled. This is a multimillionaire. You would see him with his sleeves rolled up, cutting carrots, and cutting potatoes and peeling potatoes. And that's what he did his whole life. It was dedicated to serving people. Most of his money he gave away to charity. Most of his money. He lived in a small apartment with his wife. Nothing extravagant. But he literally, I don't think he drove a car. That was his whole life. It was just dedicated to serving others.
That's amazing, man. So that probably had a tremendous impact on how you view the world, I'm sure, having grown up hearing those stories. And
you know what? It really does. And on the other hand, we live in a world right now where we've become so spoiled. I'm going to say this because I think it's so crucial and so important. But we've got so used to comfort, we don't know what life is without it. To us, a low battery on the phone is like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I need to find a charger. Where's the charger? My internet signal's weak. Like, oh my goodness, my internet signal. Like, we get caught up by, oh man, we're sitting in traffic. You've got your air conditioning blasting. It's, if it's hot outside, or if it's cold outside, right. You've got your heater on. You're sitting in a nice, comfortable, chair. No one but oh my God, we're sitting in traffic. We kind of like we get used to that. We just get used to boiling a kettle, when back in the day they would have to go out into the woods and chop the wood, whether it was freezing cold outside or boiling hot. They would have to chop wood and then collect the wood and then start a fire. And then, if you woke up in the middle of the night and you needed to go to the bathroom, you went out into the yard. You went into the yard. I mean, you done wild animals and freezing cold weather, and you're in the middle of your sleep. Now you get up and you don't even wake up. You kind of just roll into the toilet and kind of sit and do your business, and then you roll back in your bed and you barely even remember it.
Yeah,
we're so fortunate.
Or running water, man.
I mean, I could keep going. Yeah. I mean, it goes on.
No, I mean, that was something I thought about the other day.
One thing that's helped me, one thing that helps me a lot is, imagine this: about 100 years ago, the wealthiest person alive, the kings and the queens, hundreds of years ago, they don't have the luxury that some of the most basic, things that we have today. They don't have it. You know what I'm saying? If you came to King Arthur and showed him a kettle, and boiled some water instantly, he'd be like, oh my goodness, what is that? Are you, a magician? What are you, a sorcerer? You show him air conditioning and he'd be like, he's sitting there getting fanned, but even that's like, okay, whatever. But you show him air conditioning, he's like, what?
Yeah.
Basic stuff that we have. And yet we don't appreciate it because technology is evolving so fast that by the time something comes out, the other thing is like, oh, you've got an iPhone 4. What's wrong with you? Something wrong?
Yeah, it's all outdated and old. It may work, but hey, whatever. Yeah. That's funny, man. So I want to kind of get back over, since we're talking about podcasting, what is it that you think most people that are starting podcasts are doing wrong now? We'll start with that, and then I want to also we'll go into it after that. So
I think the first thing I would just say is I question the motive behind people who are starting podcasts. What's your reasoning for starting a podcast? Is it because everybody else is doing it? Right? What's the reason why you're doing it? So most people will tell me, Daniel, the reason why I'm starting a podcast, I want to build an audience. I want to build an audience, and I want to have, So the first thing I say to them is, if you want to build an audience, do you know how long it takes to build an audience with a podcast? Especially, there's 600,000 podcasts right now. 600,000, and every day there are, I don't know how many podcasts that are being launched every day, right? So
more and more, I'm sure.
If it took me, if it's taken me like 3 or 4 years to get to where I'm at now, can you imagine how long it's going to take you? Right? It's just going to be much harder now.
Yeah.
This is what I've discovered when I started getting on other people's podcasts, and I had this aha moment where I'm like, one second, this host has spent years, hours and hours and hours, hundreds of hours, building up this whole audience with content and producing and editing and all. And I am coming along, and in 30 or 60 minutes, I'm getting all the benefit that this host has put hours and hours, countless hours into building, and I've just now accessed his audience or her audience, just like that. And I could do that as many times as I want. I can go on a podcast every day if I want to. And if you get on a podcast, even a relatively small one, even if there's 100 people listening or 500 people listening, you're talking to 100 people, you're talking to 500 people. Do you know that people travel hours to get on stage? They stay in a hotel with all the expense, and they travel. They block out like 2-3 days out of their week to get on a stage to speak in front of 100, 200, 300 people.
Yeah.
And you can get on a podcast today in your pajamas without leaving your bedroom, and all you need is a pair of these guys, and suddenly you're talking to 500 people or 1,000 people, or if you're going on a bigger podcast, tens of thousands of people or millions of people if you're going on the really big ones. Yeah. That's insane. That's crazy. So think about that before you start a podcast and go through all the work that you're going to put into it, and you have to attract all the audience. I personally think that right now, if your goal is to build an audience, start getting booked on podcasts. Start going on podcasts, because I'm telling you right now, it's like it's free. It's free. That's insane. Yeah. It's free. Do you know how much it costs to pay for ads to get in front of your ideal audience? To get in front, like, you're paying money. Here, it's free. Yeah. You get on podcasts. It doesn't cost you anything.
I love that. Actually, that's a good idea. I mean, or a good thought process. I think, a big reason why I do this one, I've actually had a podcast prior to this called Market Like a Pro. And, I spent a year building that up and all that kind of stuff. But this is really where my heart's at, is in working with men. So just kind of transitioning all the relationships and the ability, all the stuff that I learned from that into this, mainly to just build exposure for other people, right, to what's possible, right, within the group. And I focus primarily on the group right now. And as this thing continues to grow, I'll be launching it out on YouTube and some different things as well. And then on iTunes, all the different channels. But like, to be able to have the ability to create authority, right? And I know that you can do that on other people's too, but within your own audience, I think is more the reason why I'm doing it here. Is consistent for the people that are loyal and all that kind of stuff. And they're not having to go and chase me down at all these different locations. But I do see a tremendous amount of value in what you're saying, for sure. Well, again, and people say to me, Daniel, should I start a podcast or should I go on other people's podcasts? And my answer is both. Yeah. You should do both. But if you can only do one, if you only have enough time to invest in one thing, to me, again, personally, I just feel like if you're getting in front of, and again, when I produce a podcast, I have, X amount of listeners listening, but they are the same people, right? Yeah. Most of them are the same people. There'll be a few new people, new listeners that are coming, but most of the time, it's majority, 90% of it is going to be the same people. When I get on other podcasts, it could be 100% of the audience doesn't even know me, never heard of me before. And now I've just exposed myself, not in that kind of way, but you know what I mean. Right. I have, right. I don't believe you. Well, on podcasts, you can expose yourself because most of them are audio only. So you could be naked and no one will know. But the point is that you're getting in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people who have never heard of you. And you could be doing that every day or every week or once a month, however much time you have to invest in that. But at the same time, down the line, I do think that you should have your own podcast, because what happens then is, let's say people listen to you on someone's podcast and they say, hey, how can I know more about you? How can I hear more about this guest? And if you say, well, actually, I've got a podcast, you can follow me at, Can I Pick Your Brain, for example, or the Daniel Gefen Show. So now you're attracting that audience, or a portion of that audience that really related to you and really liked what you were saying, and they want to hear more from you. Now you've attracted them to your podcast, and now you're growing your podcast. So for those of you listening to this that have a podcast already, again, there's no better way to grow your podcast audience than getting on other podcasts, because where are podcast listeners? They're listening to podcasts, right?
What's happening? I mean, it's insane. The numbers are crazy. There's over 70 million Americans listening to podcasts now every
That's
month.
crazy. I don't know how people have the time. There's so many good ones out there, and it's just like on top of everything else. I think I tend to get, there's so much content that I want to consume that it's just really tough to commit to just the one or whatever. So
yeah.
But I think,
yeah, well,
back to
again,
your, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that again, you are fighting for airspace, right? You're fighting for airspace.
Right.
And so, you're fighting against, let's say there's 600,000 podcasts out there. You're right. Why should people listen to yours specifically, right? When you're getting
Daniel
on,
Gefen's on it.
Well, yeah, right. Thank you very much. But my point is that when you get on other people's podcasts, you're getting on, so many different shows that you're again, you're. I've made my point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get you, man.
I don't want to like beat the dead horse.
So, okay, let's just what are the top 3 things that somebody should do to go out and start being on another person's show?
Okay, so the first thing that I would say, and this is what I do with my clients, is do not get on a podcast until you've got everything prepared. And when I say everything prepared, I'm talking about you got to know your messaging. You got to have your messaging clear. I've seen too many times people go on a podcast and they're just kind of all over the place. They don't really have a clear direction.
Yeah.
If you notice, this podcast, I've been pretty much consistent with my message, which is becoming an authority. That's my, I didn't come on the podcast and start pitching my service and saying, I can help you become an authority. I didn't do that. What I did was I told my story. I shared my story. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to have your messaging right, and you've got to get your story right. Because if you've only got your message and you're going in for a pitch, bad idea. Because I've had people come on my show and they thought it was like a late night infomercial where they're like, on page 192 of my book, I talk about it. I don't care about just don't stop pitching your book. Right. Well, if you join my webinar, then you'll just stop it. Just entertain me, give me information. I want to hear interesting facts. I want to hear your story. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to get people to relate to you on a human level. The first thing you've got to do, because people buy on emotion. They don't buy on logic. They buy emotionally. People are not interested in brands and advertising and all this crap. They want to buy into the mission. They want to buy into the person. That's key. So before you get on a single podcast, make sure you've got your story and your messaging right. And the next thing I would say is you've got to have what I call an irresistible offer that you can have at the end of the show. So when the host turns around and says, "Hey, how can my listeners get in touch with you?" Don't give them this lame thing of, well, they could send me an email or they can go to my Twitter and follow me on Twitter. No one's going to do that. Give them something of value that they can then go and take the next action, which will then convert the listeners into essentially followers and leads for you. Because if you're not doing that, you're wasting your time. Then you're just going and you've got a leaky bucket. That's what I call a leaky bucket. You're just filling up the bucket with water, but there's a hole in it and they're just falling out because you're not capturing them. So that's the first thing I do with my clients before I help them get booked on shows is prepare, get ready, be ready for it so that you can knock it out the park. That's the first thing.
What's the next thing?
The next thing is you got to have an attractive bio, okay? Because hosts get pitched all the time. Okay, we're now in a situation. We're now getting into to a point where there's a lot of people wanting to get on podcasts. So people are fighting to get on, and the quality podcasts are getting inundated with so many pitches. Right, I turn down 90% of the pitches I get because they're lame. They're using the same templated message, same templated bios, right? And so you've got to stand out. This is like when you go for a job or when you're pitching a client, you've got to stand out from your competitors. You've got to be different. Right. You got to stand out from everyone who's fighting for that spot. Okay. And so the next thing that I do with my clients is I show them, or I help them with their bio. I help them build out the bio. This is the one sheet. And I've learned as a host, and because I've interviewed over 150 guests, high profile guests, and I've seen so many bios and I've been pitched so many times, I've got to learn what are the triggers that you use in a bio. There are certain trigger points that make hosts go, oh, wow, that's a perfect fit.
Yeah.
Part of that is getting to know who your ideal audience is. Because once you know who your ideal audience is, you can speak their language. And think about it, Corey, when you're a host and you're looking at a guest, what's the one question you're asking yourself, right? The one question you're asking yourself.
How is this relevant to my audience?
How is this relevant to my audience? Is my audience going to love this guy?
Yeah.
Is my audience going to get, value from this? That's all we care about as hosts.
Right.
So if you're not speaking that language, if you're not doing that, then you're out, right? Then forget about it.
Yeah.
So the bio has to include all the different trigger points that are going to get a podcast host to accept you. The next thing is you've got to then find the right shows. And this is very difficult because, like I said, 600,000 podcasts, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, right? Where are you going to find, not only do you have to find, the quality shows, because there's a lot of dead wood out there. There's a lot of shows that, like, similar to blogs. Like, there's no point guest blogging if there's like 5 people going to see it. It's a waste of your time.
Right.
If there's 10 people who are going to be listening, so you've got to know, number one, if it's a quality show, is it worth getting on? And number two is it's got to be relevant. Because if it's not relevant, again, you're wasting your time. If you're not speaking to the right people, you can get on a podcast that has 10,000 listeners. But if they're 10,000, truck drivers wanting to know how to, I don't know. I don't know because I'm not a truck driver, right, whatever, right?
Fill the gas can. No.
Fill the gas can, yeah. So I thought oil change, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
but
there you go.
Then you're speaking to the wrong people. There's no point. I once went on a podcast, and again, I don't know what happened. I guess I must have, lost the plot for a few minutes. But I ended up on a podcast which was all about the what's it called, the builders. It was basically people construction.
Okay.
Like what do I know about construction? What do I know about construction? What benefit can I? First of all, there's little value, but also it's like they're not gonna be interested. So you've got to get on relevant shows, and you've got to find quality. So those are the two keys: relevancy, quality. How do you find them? So that's another thing that I take my clients through, show them my process that I use to be able to find the quality and the relevant shows. Once you've then got a list, so you write down a list, you have an Excel spreadsheet, and you have a list of all the shows. You have the name of the host, the email, and a description of the show, so you know about how to pitch and the angles to use.
Yeah. Once
you've got that, then you've got to create the email. And the email is very important because, again, think about how many emails hosts are getting from PR agencies and people trying to get on their show. So again, you've got to stand out. You've got to do something different. And that's the next thing that we do is we help you with the email pitch. And that's pretty much, I would say, most of it. And then there's one thing that's very crucial, which, again, I've seen time and time again, people mess this up. You have to have a funnel set up. And it could be a very simple funnel. When I say funnel, it could be very simple. It could be simply a landing page with a whatever you want to call those things, what they call cheat sheets or something of offer, a lead magnet, right? A lead magnet where you put your email address, and then you've got to have an email sequence set up so that when someone wants to grab your offer, right, your lead magnet, and they put in their email address, you then have, because what you don't want is someone takes it and then that you got the email, but they don't hear from you for like 5 months, and they're like, "Who's Corey? I don't remember him." It's like, oh, that guy. You've lost them. So you've got to have that also set up before you start going on your podcast, because otherwise, again, you've got a leaky bucket. You don't want to have a leaky bucket. That's pretty much the full sort of, I guess, the program that I've created for my clients that I work with.
That's good. How many follow-up emails do you put into your sequence typically?
That's a really good question. I mean, it depends. It's different, but I would say at least you should have the first couple of weeks, let's say the first 3 weeks worth of emails before you start getting on shows. Because once you got your first couple of weeks, then you could start adding, like maybe once a week, you can batch them. I would highly recommend to sit down one day and just kind of, block out 2 hours or whatever it is and just batch them up, like maybe write 10 emails and just basically you put them in the flow so that it automatically every 2 days or every week, depending on how far out it is. But again, that's something that I would recommend as well, depending on the client that I'm working with. Yeah.
I need to get somebody on here who's an email marketer, because that's an area that would be, like, I think, very helpful for people.
I can introduce you.
Okay, there you go. That'd be helpful. Yeah, thanks, man. And same to you. If there's anybody that you need an introduction to as well, I'd be happy to do that for you.
This is networking 101.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's actually a huge skill. I want to teach these guys too. I mean, a lot of guys probably already know, but you can never know too much, I think, in that realm, for business and stuff. But so as far as the impact that you want to make on the world, you've got 5 kids. You just had one, about a month ago?
We had one.
I think weeks ago.
He's 3 weeks old now. Yeah.
Yeah. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
I know at this point you're probably just like, hey, there's another one. You didn't keep having anymore?
My wife wants to, and I'm just like, really? Like, you're not done? And she's like, no, I want more. And I'm like, that's your department. I don't really you deal, I don't really do. I just show up. I mean, no, I have some part in it, but she's the one that has to go through 9 months of hell. I don't. So if you want to have more children, then okay,
That's funny, man. So what's the ultimate impact you want to leave on this earth?
I just want to be a good person. I want to work on myself so that I really put others before myself, because most of my life I've put myself before others. It's just probably one of the biggest struggles I've had, is always needing the attention and not allowing other people to have the attention. It's always Daniel needs attention. It's like a craving. And so, what I really want to do is I want to give other people the platform. I want to be able to give other people the spotlight. And for me, and some people might not think that's a big goal. Like, wow, that's not, but for me, that's huge. That's huge,
I think that's plenty large, man. That's huge. That's absolutely good.
That's a lifetime
goal.
Man,
thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today, man. I loved, really cool. All the different stories and the perspective. Like, why don't you let everybody know, you mentioned that you work with people to help them get some of that stuff lined out. If there's anybody watching who's interested in starting their own podcast or just looking to be a guest on others, it probably might be worth your time to talk to Daniel. Daniel, and tell them how to do that.
Sure. So if they're interested in working with me, and I only choose 10 people a month to work with. So once I've got 10 people that I've chosen to work with for that month, I shut it down and I close whatever. I don't work with more than 10 because I really go deep with my clients. I don't do courses. Currently, I'm not doing group coaching. I only do one-on-one, because I personally believe that if you want real transformation, you've got to go deep, and you've got to it's one-on-one. I just don't feel like courses. I mean, think about how many courses you've taken, and has it really given you that transformation that you were looking for? And for me, it hasn't. So I'm very big on just one-on-one at the moment. If you want to apply for that, send me an email. It's Daniel@GefenMediaGroup.com. That's Daniel@GefenMediaGroup.com, and it's 1 F in Gefen.
Yeah.
And if you actually just want to know
Gefen.
Yeah, Gefen. And if you just want to know more about how to be a great guest and how to prepare yourself for guesting on podcasts, I've written a very extensive guide that takes you through a process that I use with my clients. And you can get that at podcastguestsuccess.com. That's podcastguestsuccess.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I hope y'all really enjoyed this interview today with Daniel. If you have the opportunity to go and check him out on Facebook today, I would definitely recommend that you go and do that, like his page. And guys, I really want y'all to take note about the importance of knowing how to do some of these things that we've been talking about. Last week, we talked about PR and how to get on the news and traditional media and then how to turn that into content. Today, we're talking about podcasting and getting on other people's podcasts, and they run in the same vein. They're not exactly the same, but they definitely run in the same vein, and you're able to build this content, which is key to getting known. And guys, you want to do big things, you want to be the men that build the world, you have to be seen. This is not just going to happen while you're sitting in your office hoping that the phone rings. Those days are long gone. Actually, they never even existed. But with the internet, it's impossible for that to be the path forward. If you want to be successful in business and in life, and you have something inside of you that that the world needs to hear about, or you want to be able to share with the world, then this is the path forward. I'm very strategic about the guys that I'm bringing on here to share this type of value with you. And this is no accident that he was specifically chosen to be on here, because I love you guys. I definitely are, first and foremost, like we talked about before. And so the content that we talk about here is to do that, is to equip you so that men can rise and they can go out and be everything that they were created to be. And we can stop hearing about, how all of these things happening. We are the answer to the things happening in this world. We set identity in culture, we set identity in our families, and we set identity across the world. And when we band together as brothers and we rise in our chosen fields of expertise, the world is going to be a better place, hands down. Thank y'all for taking the time to tune in today. I appreciate it so much. And man, if there's anything I can do for you men at all, then feel free to reach out to me. And again, check out Daniel's stuff. Daniel, thanks again for being on, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Corey, thank you very, very much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Men, hope y'all are out working today. It's the day after Christmas. So get out there and conquer. And we'll talk to y'all later.